It was a bright, sunny Saturday morning. The sky was blue, the birds were chirping, and everything felt happy and calm. That's when Jake Miller rolled into Pinewood Estates. He was riding a big, shiny black motorcycle. The engine made a deep, rumbling sound, like a lion growling low in its throat. He pulled into the driveway of his new house and turned off the bike. The noise stopped, but you could still feel it in the air. It was the kind of sound that said, "I'm here and I'm not going anywhere." Jake climbed off his motorcycle and stood up tall. He was a big guy, not super huge, but tall enough to make you notice him. He had dark hair and a quiet way about him. He didn't smile much or wave to anyone. He just grabbed his helmet, tucked it under his arm, and looked around. This was his new home, a little house with a small yard in a neighborhood full of perfect lawns and fancy flowers. The people in Pinewood Estates peeked out their windows. They saw Jake and his loud bike and they started whispering. "Who's that guy?" they asked each other. "He looks different. He's not like us." Most of them thought he was just some regular guy who liked motorcycles. Maybe he worked at a store or fixed cars for a living. They didn't know the truth, not yet. Jake had a secret, a big one, and it was going to change everything. See, Pinewood Estates wasn't just any neighborhood. It was a place where everyone followed the same rules. The houses all looked neat and tidy. The grass was always cut short, the cars were clean and parked just right, and the people, they liked things to stay the same. They had a group called the Pinewood Homeowners Association, or HOA for short. The HOA made sure everyone did what they were supposed to. If you didn't follow their rules, they got mad, really mad. Jake didn't know much about the HOA when he moved in. He just wanted a quiet place to live. He liked his motorcycle, his little house, and keeping to himself. But the HOA, they didn't like him at all, not one bit. Why? Because Jake didn't join their club. He didn't sign their papers or pay their fees. He didn't go to their meetings or say yes to their bossy ideas. To them, that made him a problem, a big, loud problem on a shiny black bike. The first day Jake showed up, the neighbors watched him like hawks. There was Mrs. Linda, who lived next door. She had curly gray hair and always carried a little notebook to write down things she didn't like. She saw Jake's motorcycle and frowned. "That thing is too noisy," she muttered to herself. "It doesn't belong here." Across the street was Mr. Tom, a short guy with a big belly. He liked to water his flowers every morning. When he heard Jake's engine, he shook his head. "In trouble," he said under his breath. "That guy going to cause trouble." Then there was Karen Baxter. Oh, Karen was the boss of the HOA. She wore a bright pink jacket and walked around like she owned the whole neighborhood. She had sharp eyes and a loud voice. If something wasn't perfect, Karen would fix it or make someone else fix it. The second she saw Jake, she didn't like him. "Who does he think he is?" she said to her friends. "He can't just move in and ignore us. We have rules." Jake didn't care about their rules. He wasn't mean or rude. He just didn't want to be told what to do. He parked his motorcycle in his driveway right where everyone could see it. To him, it was his bike, his house, his life. But to the HOA, that bike was like a big sign saying, "I don't listen to you." And that made them mad. Really, really mad. The neighborhood was quiet that first day, but you could feel something brewing. It was like the calm before a storm. Jake went inside his house and shut the door. The neighbors kept watching. They didn't know it yet, but they were about to make a huge mistake. A mistake so big it would turn their perfect little world upside down. Let's rewind a bit. Before Jake moved in, Pinewood Estates was peaceful, at least on the outside. Everyone smiled and waved to each other. They had picnics and parties. They painted their houses the same colors and planted the same flowers. The HOA made sure it stayed that way. If your grass grew too long, they'd send you a letter. If your car was too old, they'd tell you to get a new one. If you didn't listen, they'd find a way to make you sorry. Karen loved being in charge. She'd walk around with her clipboard, checking on everything. "This is our neighborhood," she'd say. "We keep it nice, we keep it perfect." Most people went along with it. They didn't want trouble, but Jake, he wasn't like most people. He didn't care about their perfect lawns or their silly rules. He just wanted to live his life. That sunny Saturday when Jake rolled in, the HOA had no idea who they were dealing with. They thought he was just some guy, maybe a troublemaker, maybe someone they could boss around. They were wrong. Dead wrong. Jake wasn't loud or pushy, but he had something they didn't expect, something big, something that would make them wish they'd left him alone. The motorcycle was the first thing they noticed. It wasn't just shiny, it was loud. Every time Jake started it up, the sound bounced off the houses. It wasn't super annoying, but it was enough to make the neighbors twitch. Mrs. Linda wrote it down in her notebook. Mr. Tom grumbled to his wife. Karen, she made a plan. "We'll talk to him," she told her HOA friends. "He'll join us or he'll regret it." Jake didn't hear them plotting. He was too busy unpacking boxes in his new house. He set up a little table, put his helmet on a shelf, and opened a can of soda. He liked things simple. He didn't need fancy stuff or nosy neighbors, but the HOA didn't see it that way. To them, Jake was a puzzle they couldn't figure out, and when they couldn't figure something out, they got rid of it. The sun started to set that day, painting the sky orange and pink. Jake stepped outside to look at his bike. He ran his hand over the seat and smiled a little. That motorcycle wasn't just a ride, it was his pride. He'd worked hard for it. He loved the way it felt on the road, the wind in his face, the freedom. But to the HOA, it was a problem. A big, black, noisy problem. As the stars came out, the neighborhood got quiet again. Jake went back inside and the lights in his house turned off. The neighbors stopped peeking for now. They thought they had time to deal with him. They thought they could scare him into following their rules. They had no idea what was coming. So here where you come in. Where are you watching from today? Are you in a big city, a small town, maybe somewhere with lots of trees or a sandy beach? Drop it in the comments below, I want to know. And while you're at it, tell me this. Have you ever met someone who didn't fit in but turned out to be super cool? Jake's story is just getting started, and trust me, it's going to get wild. The HOA thought they were smart. They thought they could push Jake around. But they didn't know who he really was. They didn't know the secret he was hiding. That motorcycle, it wasn't just a bike. And Jake, he wasn't just some guy. The neighbors were about to find out the hard way. This was only the beginning. A sunny Saturday, a new guy, and a neighborhood that didn't like change. It sounded simple, but it was. Trouble was coming, big trouble, and Jake, he was ready for it, even if no one else knew it yet. So stick around because this story's got more twists than a roller coaster. The HOA was about to make a huge mistake, and Jake was going to make sure they never forgot it. Where will you be when the truth comes out? Let's find out together. The Pinewood Homeowners Association, or HOA, was like a team of bosses for the neighborhood. And the biggest boss of all was Karen Baxter. Karen was a lady who didn't mess around. She carried a clipboard everywhere, scribbling notes about anything she didn't like. Her eyes were sharp, and when she stared at you, it felt like a bear growling in your face. She wore a bright pink jacket that you could spot a mile away. When she walked down the street, people listened. She barked orders like she owned every house, every tree, every blade of grass. Karen loved rules. She loved telling people what to do, and most folks in Pinewood Estates went along with it. They didn't want to make her mad, but then Jake Miller moved in and everything changed. Jake wasn't like the others. He didn't bow down to Karen or her clipboard. He didn't care about her rules, and that drove her crazy. It started a few days after Jake rolled into town on his shiny black motorcycle. The sun was high in the sky, and Karen was out on her usual patrol. She marched up to Jake's house, her pink jacket glowing in the light. Jake was outside, wiping down his bike with a rag. The engine was quiet now, but it still looked tough, like it could roar to life any second. Karen stopped right in front of him, her hands on her hips. "Jake," she said, her voice loud and sharp like a whistle, "you need to join the HOA." She pointed at his motorcycle with her pen. "That thing is an eyesore. It's loud, it's messy, it doesn't fit our vibe." Jake looked up at her. He didn't say much. He just shrugged his shoulders, nice and slow. "It's my bike," he said. "My house. I'm good." His voice was calm, like he didn't have a worry in the world. Karen's face turned red, bright reds like a tomato about to burst. She wasn't used to hearing no. Most people said yes to her right away. They'd nod and smile and do whatever she wanted. But Jake, he didn't budge, he didn't flinch. He just stood there, tall and quiet, wiping his bike like Karen wasn't even worth his time. Behind her, a few neighbors were watching. There was Mrs. Linda, the lady with the notebook, standing by her fence. She smirked a little, like she thought Jake was being silly. Next to her was Mr. Tom, the guy with the big belly. He crossed his arms and whispered to his wife, "That Jake guy thinks he's too big for his boots." They giggled quietly, thinking Jake was just some troublemaker who didn't know his place. Oh, but they were wrong, so wrong. Jake wasn't just some guy with a loud bike. He wasn't just a rebel who liked to break rules. He was something more, something big. He had a secret hiding inside him, like a treasure chest locked up tight. And while Karen and the neighbors laughed and whispered, Jake was watching. He was waiting. He didn't say much, but his eyes saw everything, every glare, every smirk, every mean word. He was keeping it all in his head, like a list he'd use later. Karen stomped away that day, her pink jacket flapping in the wind. She was madder than a bee stuck in a jar. "He'll learn," she muttered to herself. "He can't ignore us forever." She went straight to her house and called a meeting with her HOA friends. They sat around her kitchen table, sipping lemonade and nodding as she talked. "Jake, a problem," she said, tapping her clipboard. "That motorcycle has to go. We'll make him join us or else." The neighbors agreed. They didn't like Jake either. His bike was too loud, his house wasn't fancy enough, and worst of all, he didn't listen to them. To the HOA, Jake was like a weed in their perfect garden. They wanted to pull him out and toss him away. But Jake, he didn't care. He kept living his life, quiet and steady, like nothing could shake him. The next day, things got worse. Jake was out in his yard, fixing a loose board on his porch. Karen marched over again, this time with Mrs. Linda and Mr. Tom behind her. They looked like a little army ready to fight. "Jake," Karen said, her voice even sharper than before, "I'm giving you one more chance. Join the HOA, pay the fees, and get rid of that ugly bike." Jake put down his hammer and stood up. He was tall, taller than Karen, taller than Mr. Tom. He looked at them with his calm eyes and said, "I already told you, it's my bike, my house. I don't need your club." Karen's eyes got wide. Mrs. Linda gasped. Mr. Tom puffed out his chest like he was about to argue. But before anyone could say more, Jake turned around and walked back to his porch. He picked up his hammer and kept working like they weren't even there. That made Karen furious. She wasn't just mad now, she was boiling. "Fine," she snapped, loud enough for the whole street to hear. "You'll see what happens when you don't play by our rules." She turned to her friends and said, "We'll teach him a lesson. He'll wish he'd listened." The neighbors walked away, whispering and planning. They thought Jake was weak. They thought he was alone. They thought they could scare him into doing what they wanted. But here's the thing, they didn't know Jake at all. He wasn't scared. He wasn't weak. He was just quiet, watching them like a cat watches a mouse. And that secret he had, it was still locked up tight, waiting for the right moment to come out. The days went by and the tension grew. It was like a rubber band being stretched tighter and tighter. You could feel it in the air. The HOA started doing little things to bother Jake. One morning, he found a nasty note taped to his door. It said, "Join or leave," in big, angry letters. Jake read it, crumpled it up, and tossed it in the trash. He didn't say a word. Another day, someone scratched a line in the dirt near his driveway. It wasn't much, but it was a message. "You don't belong here." Jake saw it and just swept it away with his boot. He didn't yell or complain. He stayed calm like always, but inside he was paying attention. He was counting every move the HOA made. Karen kept pushing. She'd walk by his house every day, glaring at that motorcycle. She'd talk to the neighbors, saying things like, "He's ruining our street," or "We can't let him win." The others nodded and agreed. They started to feel brave, like they could do anything to Jake and get away with it. They didn't know they were walking right into a trap Jake didn't even have to set. One afternoon, Jake was sitting on his porch drinking a soda. Karen came by with her clipboard and stopped in front of his yard. "Last warning, Jake," she said, her voice cold as ice. "Get rid of that bike or we'll do it for you." Now Jake took a sip of his soda and looked at her. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. He just said, "You sure about that?" His words were soft, but there was something in them, something that made Karen pause for a second. She didn't know why, but she felt a tiny shiver. I'm sure, she snapped back, trying to sound tough. You'll see. Then she turned and marched off, her pink jacket bouncing with every step. Jake watched her go. He didn't move. He didn't say anything else, but if you looked close, you might have seen a tiny spark in his eyes. He wasn't just some guy they could boss around. He was more than that, a lot more. The HOA thought they were in charge, but they were wrong. Jake had something up his sleeve, something big enough to flip their whole world upside down. The tension was thick now, like fog you could cut with a knife. The neighbors smirked and whispered. Karen made her plans, and Jake, he stayed quiet, watching and waiting. They didn't know it yet, but they were picking a fight with the wrong person, a fight they couldn't win. Days went by after Karen told Jake to join the HOA or else. The sun rose and set, the birds sang, and Pinewood Estates looked as perfect as ever on the outside. But underneath, things were getting messy. The HOA wasn't happy with Jake. Not one bit. They didn't like his motorcycle, his quiet ways, or how he ignored their rules. And now, they were ready to get tougher. It started small. One morning, Jake stepped outside to grab his newspaper. Taped to his front door was a nasty note. It was written in big, messy letters, "Pay up or else." The paper was crumpled, like someone had been mad when they wrote it. Jake pulled it off, read it, and shook his head. He didn't yell or run to tell anyone. He just walked inside, tossed the note in the trash, and went about his day. But the HOA wasn't done. A few nights later, Jake came home after a long day. It was dark outside and the streetlights buzzed softly. He parked his motorcycle in the driveway and walked to his mailbox. When he got there, he stopped. The mailbox was smashed. The metal was bent and the little door hung open like a broken toy. Someone had hit it hard, really hard. Jake stood there for a second, looking at the mess. He didn't shout or get mad. He didn't call the neighbors or bang on doors. He just grabbed a hammer from his garage, fixed the mailbox as best he could, and went inside. To anyone watching, it looked like he didn't care, but Jake cared. He just didn't show it. He was keeping it all inside, like a pot of water starting to bubble before it boils. Karen and her HOA crew watched from their windows. They saw Jake fix the mailbox and go back to his quiet life. They thought he was weak. They thought he was scared. "He's not fighting back," Mrs. Linda said, scribbling in her notebook. "He'll give up soon," Mr. Tom added, nodding like he knew everything. But Karen, she wasn't so sure. She didn't like how calm Jake was. It bugged her like an itch she couldn't scratch. The truth was, Karen hated that motorcycle most of all. To her, it wasn't just a bike. It was a big, loud no to everything she wanted. She loved her perfect little kingdom, her neat lawns, her quiet streets, her rules that everyone followed. That shiny black motorcycle, with its deep growl and tough look, didn't fit. It was like a thorn in her side, poking her every time she saw it. And Jake, he was the guy who kept that thorn there, refusing to pull it out. So the HOA got bolder. They didn't stop with notes and smashed mailboxes. They started talking about Jake all the time. At their meetings, they'd sit around Karen's table, sipping tea and making plans. "He's got to go," Karen would say, her voice low and sneaky. "That bike's got to go. If he won't play by our rules, we'll make him." Her friends nodded, their eyes gleaming like they were in on a big secret. One evening, Jake was out for a walk. The air was cool and the stars were just starting to peek out. He liked walking at night. It was quiet and he could think. As he passed the community center, he heard voices, loud voices. He slowed down and stepped closer, staying in the shadows so no one would see him. Inside, Karen was holding a neighborhood meeting. The room was full of HOA members, all sitting in a circle. "That bike's gotta go," Karen hissed to her buddies. Her pink jacket glowed under the lights and her clipboard sat on her lap like a weapon. "Jake thinks he's better than us. He won't join, won't pay, won't listen. We can't let him win. If he won't follow our rules, we'll force him to." Mrs. Linda leaned forward. "What if we tell him to move out?" she asked. Mr. Tom rubbed his chin. "Or we could take that bike away ourselves," he said, grinning like it was a game. Karen nodded slowly. "Yes," she said. "We'll start small, but if he doesn't give in, we'll do whatever it takes." Now Jake stood outside, listening to every word. The window was cracked open just enough for him to hear. He didn't move. He didn't make a sound, but if you looked close, you'd see something, a tiny smile creeping onto his face. It wasn't a big grin or a laugh. It was small, sneaky, like he knew something they didn't, and he did. Oh, he did. See, every rude word, every dirty look, every smashed mailbox, it was all building up. Jake wasn't just sitting there taking it. He was watching, waiting, and keeping track. The HOA thought they were smart. They thought they could push him around. But Jake had a secret, a big one. And every mean thing they did was like a step closer to the moment he'd let it out. The next day, things got even wilder. Jake woke up to find his trash cans tipped over. Garbage was all over his yard, old food, paper, cans, everything. It stunk and it looked awful. The neighbors peeked out their windows, giggling like kids who'd pulled a prank. Jake didn't say a word. He grabbed a broom, swept it up, and put the cans back, calm as ever. Karen saw him cleaning and smirked. "He's cracking," she told her friends. "He can't keep this up." But Jake wasn't cracking. He was steady like a rock in a storm. He didn't fight back, not yet. He just kept going like nothing could touch him. A few nights later, Jake was in his garage working on his motorcycle. He liked tinkering with it, making sure it ran smooth. The garage door was open and the light spilled out onto the driveway. That's when he heard footsteps. He looked up and saw three shadows: Karen, Mrs. Linda, and Mr. Tom. They stood there, staring at him. "And Jake," Karen said, her voice hard, "this is your last chance. Get rid of that bike or we'll make your life miserable." Jake wiped his hands on a rag and stood up. He didn't rush. He didn't yell. He just looked at them and said, "You're making a mistake." His words were quiet, but they had weight, like a warning bell ringing soft and low. Karen laughed. "A mistake? You're the mistake, Jake. You don't belong here." Mrs. Linda nodded, and Mr. Tom puffed out his chest. They turned and walked away, thinking they'd won. But Jake, he watched them go, and that tiny smile came back. He knew something they didn't, something big. The HOA kept pushing. One day, Jake found a sign stuck in his yard. It said, "Move out," in red paint. He pulled it up and threw it away. Another time, someone scratched a mean word on his driveway with chalk. He hosed it off. Every little attack made the neighbors bolder. They thought they were winning. They thought Jake was scared. But Jake wasn't scared. He was patient. Every note, every mess, every threat, it was like fuel for a fire they didn't see coming. He stayed quiet, but his eyes were sharp. He heard Karen's plans, he saw their smirks, and he waited. The motorcycle sat in his driveway, shiny and proud. To the HOA, it was the enemy. To Jake, it was more than that. It was a piece of who he was, a piece they didn't understand. And soon they'd find out why. Every rude word, every dirty trick was leading to something huge, something they'd never expect. The air in Pinewood Estates was thick with trouble now. The HOA was ready to strike harder. Karen was plotting something big. And Jake, he was ready too. That tiny smile on his face said it all. They thought they knew him. They thought they could break him. But they were wrong, so wrong. It all came crashing down late one Friday night. The moon was high in the sky and Pinewood Estates was quiet, too quiet. Jake was fast asleep in his little house, dreaming about the open road and his shiny black motorcycle. Then loud shouts snapped him awake. He jumped out of bed, his heart pounding like a drum. Something was wrong, really wrong. He ran to his window and yanked the curtain back. What he saw made his eyes go wide. Flames, big orange flames, were licking up into the night. His motorcycle was on fire. The bike he loved, the one he'd worked so hard for, was burning right there in his driveway. The fire crackled and popped, sending sparks flying like angry little stars. Jake squinted through the smoke. That's when he saw her, Karen Baxter. She stood a few feet away, her bright pink jacket glowing in the firelight. She had a gas can in her hand and a big, smug grin stretched across her face. Behind her, Mrs. Linda and Mr. Tom were cheering like it was a party. "That'll teach him," Karen laughed, her voice loud and mean. "No more bike, no more trouble." The neighbors peeked out their windows, watching the show. Some giggled, some clapped. They thought Jake was done for. They thought Karen had won. But Jake, he didn't yell, he didn't scream or run around in a panic. He stayed cool as ice. He grabbed his phone from the table, slipped on his boots, and stepped outside into the smoky night. The air smelled like burning rubber and gas. The heat from the fire warmed his face as he walked down his steps. Karen didn't even look scared. She crossed her arms and stared at him, that grin still stuck on her face. Mrs. Linda smirked, and Mr. Tom puffed out his chest like he was a big shot. They thought they'd finally beaten Jake. Jake stopped a few feet from Karen. The flames roared behind him, but he didn't flinch. He looked her right in the eyes and said, "Karen, you sure you wanna do this?" His voice was calm, super calm, like the quiet before a storm hits. Karen rolled her eyes so hard they almost popped out. "You're nobody, Jake," she snapped. "Deal with it. That bike's gone and you're next. You should have listened to us." She laughed again and her pals joined in. They thought it was over. They thought Jake was just some guy they could push around. Oh, how wrong they were. That's when it happened. A sound cut through the night, loud, wailing sirens. They started far off but got closer fast. Red and blue lights flashed down the street, bouncing off the houses. Everyone froze. Corinne's laugh stopped dead. Mrs. Linda's smirk faded. Mr. Tom's chest deflated like a popped balloon. A police cruiser screeched around the corner and slammed to a stop right in front of Jake's house. The doors flew open and two officers jumped out. They were big, serious guys in dark uniforms with shiny badges on their chests. The neighbors gasped. Corinne's gas can slipped a little in her hand. Now Jake didn't run to them, he didn't hide. He just turned and walked over to the officers, slow and steady. He didn't look scared, not even a little. The fire kept burning, lighting up his face, but he was cool as ever. The crowd watched, holding their breath. What was he doing? Then Jake reached into his pocket. He pulled out something small and shiny, a badge. He held it up high so everyone could see it glimmer in the firelight. "State Trooper Jake Miller," he said, loud and clear. His voice wasn't shaky. It wasn't quiet. It rang out like a bell, cutting through the crackle of the flames. "You just torched my bike, Corinne. That's arson." The world stopped. Corinne's jaw dropped so low it almost hit the ground. Her eyes got huge, like saucers. The gas can fell from her hand and clattered on the pavement. Mrs. Linda gasped and dropped her notebook. Mr. Tom stumbled back, tripping over his own feet. The neighbors at their windows went dead silent. Nobody moved, nobody breathed. Now Jake stood there, tall and steady, his badge shining like a star. The officers stepped forward, their boots thumping on the ground. One of them looked at Corinne and said, "Ma'am, put your hands where we can see them." His voice was deep and serious. The other officer pulled out handcuffs, the metal clicking in the quiet night. Corinne blinked fast, like she couldn't believe it. What?" she stammered. "This is a mistake. He's nobody. He's just some guy." But her words sounded weak now, like a kid whining. The smug grin was gone. She looked scared, really scared for the first time. Now Jake didn't smile, he didn't gloat, he just looked at her, calm and strong. "I told you," he said softly, "you made a mistake." Then he turned to the officers and nodded. "She set the fire, they helped." He pointed at Mrs. Linda and Mr. Tom, who were shaking like leaves in the wind. The officers moved fast. One grabbed Corinne's arms and pulled them behind her back. The handcuffs snapped shut with a loud click. "You're under arrest," the officer said. "Arson's a big deal." Corinne twisted and yelled, "No, you can't do this. I'm in charge here." But nobody listened. Mrs. Linda tried to run, but the other officer caught her quick. "Don't move," he barked. Mr. Tom just stood there, his face white as a ghost. The crowd of neighbors watched, their mouths open wide. They couldn't believe it. Jake wasn't just some guy. He was a state trooper, a real police officer with power they didn't see coming. The fire kept burning, but it didn't matter anymore. The big reveal was out. Jake's secret was free, and it hit like a thunderclap. Karen and her crew thought they'd won. They thought they could burn his bike and scare him away. But they picked the wrong guy, the wrong fight. The red and blue lights flashed, painting the street in wild colors. The sirens wailed, loud and proud. Jake stood by his burning bike, watching as the officers took Karen and her pals away. He didn't say much, he didn't have to. The truth was out, and it was bigger than anything the HOA could handle. The night was wild, but now it was over. The police officers didn't waste time. They grabbed Karen's arms and snapped handcuffs on her wrists. Click, click. Her bright pink jacket flapped like a flag as they pulled her toward the police car. "This is a mistake," she screeched, her voice high and loud. "You can't do this to me." But no one listened. Not the cops, not the neighbors, not even her friends. She kicked and twisted, but the officers were strong. They pushed her into the back seat and slammed the door shut. Mrs. Linda and Mr. Tom got caught too. They didn't fight as hard, but they looked scared. Their faces were pale and their hands shook as the cops led them away. Turns out, Jake wasn't just any trooper. He was a state trooper, a big deal police officer, and he'd been working undercover nearby, keeping everything quiet. He didn't tell anyone who he was because he didn't have to. The HOA had no clue. They picked a fight with the law itself. Big mistake. The fire trucks came next. They roared down the street with their loud horns and bright lights. Firefighters jumped out and sprayed water on Jake's burning motorcycle. The flames hissed and died, leaving a smoky, soggy mess. But Jake didn't care about that right now. He stood there watching Karen yell from the police car. Justice was happening and it felt good. The next morning, the neighborhood was buzzing like a beehive. People stood on their porches, whispering to each other. "Did you hear? Jake's a trooper," they said. "Karen's in big trouble now." The ones who'd laughed at Jake before wouldn't even look at him. They kept their heads down, ashamed. They'd been so mean, so sure they were right. Now they knew the truth, and it hit them hard. The HOA got slapped with trouble too. The police didn't just take Karen, they gave the whole group big fines. That means they had to pay lots of money for breaking the rules. And Karen, she wasn't just going home with a warning. She was looking at jail time, maybe years behind bars for setting Jake's bike on fire. Arson's a serious crime, and she couldn't talk her way out of it. A few days later, something cool happened. Jake got a brand new motorcycle. The state gave it to him because he was a trooper and they wanted to help. It was shiny and black, just like the old one, but even better. He parked it right in his driveway, exactly where the burned one used to be. It gleamed in the sun, big and proud. Every time the neighbors walked by, they saw it. It was like a sign that said, "Don't mess with the wrong guy." Jake didn't brag. He didn't rub it in anyone's face. He just went back to his quiet life, fixing up his house and riding his new bike. But things were different now. The HOA wasn't so bossy anymore. People stopped leaving notes or smashing things. They learned their lesson. Jake was tougher than they thought, and justice always wins in the end. Jake's story didn't stay quiet for long. It spread fast, like wildfire jumping from tree to tree. By the next week, everyone in Pinewood Estates knew what happened. Neighbors told their friends, and those friends told more friends. Soon, people all over town were talking about the guy with the motorcycle and the HOA that got it all wrong. "Did you hear about Jake?" they'd say. He's a trooper. Karen burned his bike and now she's in jail. The kids on bikes rode by his house, pointing at the shiny new motorcycle in the driveway. That's his, they shout, eyes wide with excitement. Even the grown-ups couldn't stop chatting about it over coffee or at the store. Jake's story was big news and it taught everyone something important, something they'd never forget. Here's the big lesson: you never know who's standing in front of you. Jake looked like just some guy, tall, quiet, with a loud bike. The HOA thought he was nobody special. They thought they could push him around, laugh at him, and make him do what they wanted. But they were so wrong. The quiet ones, the ones you pick on, they might have power you can't see. They might push back harder than you ever dreamed. Think about it. Karen saw Jake and decided he was weak. She judged him fast because he didn't talk much or follow her rules. She didn't stop to wonder who he really was. Neither did Mrs. Linda or Mr. Tom. They all thought they had him figured out. But Jake was a state trooper, a hero hiding in plain sight. He didn't need to brag or shout. His strength was silent, and it hit like a thunderbolt when the time was right. That's the cool thing about people. You can't always tell what's inside them just by looking. Someone might seem small or shy, but they could be brave. Someone might look ordinary, but they could be amazing. Jake's story shows us to be careful. Next time you think you've got someone all figured out, stop and think again. The real surprise might be waiting just around the corner, ready to jump out when you least expect it. Maybe you've seen this happen. Maybe you know someone who seemed one way but turned out to be so much more. Like a kid at school who's quiet but super smart, or a friend who doesn't show off but helps everyone when they need it. People are full of surprises, and that's what makes life fun. You never know who's got a secret like Jake and his badge hiding under their calm face. So what about you? Ever met someone who turned out to be more than they seemed? Maybe it was a teacher, a neighbor, or even a kid in your class. Drop your story in the comments below. I'd love to hear it. Jake's tale is proof that the quiet ones can be the strongest, and the ones who judge too fast, they're the ones who miss out. Next time you meet someone new, don't be like Karen. Don't decide they're nothing before you know them. Give them a chance, watch and listen. You might find a hero standing right there waiting to shine. Jake showed us that power doesn't always yell, it whispers, and when it's ready, it changes everything. Keep your eyes open because the best surprises are still out there, ready to roll in like a shiny black motorcycle on a sunny day.